Awesome. Not very good with technology, as you guys can tell. All right, awesome. So like I said, make sure to grab pens, papers, because you will need to take a lot of notes. And then once again, so I know this will be mentioned later, just so you guys know, the FAFSA is opening up on October 1st. So this is perfect timing for you guys to take those notes down, so you guys are prepared for when it opens up. And then Erica will take it on from here.
Yes. So good evening, everyone. I'm Erica Artiega. I'm one of the financial aid counselors actually in the Office of Student Financial Services at Elmhurst University. I've been at Elmhurst for a little bit less than 2 years now. So our office can provide you any financial aid information, or answer any questions that you may have on the FAFSA application. So I would recommend for this presentation, definitely take a lot of notes, but also if you have questions, save them until the end, because we are going to go over a lot of information. So your questions may be answered along the way. So just try to wait until the very end for any questions that you have. We'll have plenty of time to answer those once we get to the Q&A section. So we'll go ahead and get started. Michelle, was there a slide right before this one? Okay, yes, perfect, thank you. So first and foremost, what is the FAFSA? The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. This application will determine a student's eligibility for federal and state financial aid. And, you know, to be eligible for certain funds, can you go to the next one? And I think there's one right before this one. Here we go. Perfect. So when you complete the FAFSA, again, you're applying for grants, loans, federal work study. Some of the grants that you may be eligible for if you file a FAFSA is the federal Pell Grant. This is a need-based grant. The Illinois MAP grant, that is also a need-based grant. Federal student loans. There's two different types of federal student loans that you may qualify for. A subsidized loan is also a need-based loan. An unsubsidized loan is offered to any student who files a FAFSA application. And then you may also be eligible for federal work study, which is earned financial aid. And your eligibility is also based on your financial need. So the way that we determine your financial need is with the data that you actually provide on your FAFSA application. So we'll go into more detail about like the different questions that you'll have to answer and the information that you'll need to provide on the application. I did just want to make a quick note. If students are offered federal student loans, you're not required to accept those. So keep that in mind. It's just an additional form of financial aid to help pay for your, you know, college tuition, room and board, any other expenses like that. So all financial aid that you're eligible for will be listed on your award letter, and students will receive a hard copy of their award letter for their first year, and then they'll also will receive an email notification letting them know when it's available to view online. So after you file your FAFSA, you'll wait a few weeks, a few months, depending on when you submit it, to get an email notification that you can view your award letter. All right, so to start the FAFSA, first and foremost, step one, you'll want to create an FSA ID. I would recommend even doing that right now. The application doesn't open until Friday, but this is a step that you can do before then, if you just want to get a jump start on that. An FSA ID is a username and password that you'll need to create using your social security number and an email address or a phone number. This gives you access to the FAFSA application. It allows you to electronically sign your FAFSA, the master promissory note, complete entrance counseling. It just gives you access to any forms on the FAFSA website. So students will need to create their own personal FSA ID using their own personal social security number and their own personal email address. I would recommend using a permanent email address. Don't use your school, like your high school email address, because that one you may lose access to it, after graduation. So definitely use a permanent one, like a Gmail, a Yahoo. If you don't have one, create one so that you can use that, for everything else. So step one, FSA ID. You can get this done out of the way right now if you want. And the link is there, studentaid.gov/FSA-ID. Your parent will also need to create one to sign the FAFSA. They'll use their own social security number, their own phone number or email address. So student and parent both create 2 separate FSA IDs. All right, step 2, which you can also start doing this now before the application opens. Gather all of the documents that you'll need to apply. You'll need a social security number, your parents' social security numbers if they have one, get your driver's license if you have one, and then gather your federal tax documents from 2020. So federal tax returns or W-2s for yourself if you filed, and then for your parent as well. Also get any records of untaxed income, like any child support records, veterans benefits, things like that. You'll also want information on cash, savings, and checking account balances. There is a question on the FAFSA that will ask specifically for this information. And then it'll ask for information on investments, business assets, things like that. So try to gather all of these documents before you sit down and begin the application, just so that it's easier for you to, go based off of the documents that you already have in front of you. All right. And then once you have all of that, you can officially start completing that FAFSA form. Again, that application will become available on Friday, October 1st. If you haven't already written it on your calendar, made yourself a reminder, do that right now. We recommend that you file as soon as possible. There are certain grants that are awarded until the funds are depleted. So once the funds run out, then that's it. So that's why we recommend filing as soon as possible, as close as you can to October 1st. You'll log into FAFSA.gov, or you can also access it through studentaid.gov. All of those federal student aid websites are connected. You'll log in with the FSA ID that you created. And then I do also want to highly stress the importance of making sure that the social security number that you're using is the social security number that is on your social security card. So make sure it matches, make sure that your name also matches. I know it's kind of like, well, duh, I know my name, but make sure that it's exactly as it's listed on your social security card. So definitely take your time with that. Make sure that you're entering the numbers correctly. Make sure that you're entering your name correctly. Make sure you're entering parents' names correctly, because all of this will be checked. And if there's a discrepancy in the social security number, then schools won't be able to pull in your FAFSAs. So very, very important to have your social security card with you so that you can, eliminate the mistakes that some students run into with their social security numbers. All right, on the FAFSA application, there's also a section, it's called school selection, and you can list up to 10 schools in the school selection section. These schools will receive your FAFSA application, and then That way, once you have your award letters, you can compare and contrast your award packages, see which schools are offering you what. In terms of federal financial aid, I do want everyone to keep in mind your federal financial aid will most likely be the same at all of your schools. The difference that you'll see in your award packages from school to school will most likely be any like academic scholarships. So if you're eligible for certain grants, certain federal grants or certain state grants, you'll get those most likely at every school. Also, I do want to everyone to, if you're interested in applying at Elmhurst, that you make note of the Elmhurst University school code so that you can list us in your school selection. And that school code is 001676. So definitely make a note of that and include us in your school selection. All right, another section in the FAFSA application is going to be dependency status. It's important to also know that there's a difference between dependency for tax purposes, like if your parents list you as a dependent on their taxes or not, and then dependency status for FAFSA purposes. So those are two complete different things. They are not linked whatsoever. So what the FAFSA means by a dependent student is that they are still relying on their parents basically, you know, to pay for their educational expenses. And they just assume that students who, you know, meet certain criteria are going to have parental help for school expenses, things like that. So if you are a dependent student, then you must provide parental information on the FAFSA. And then you'll see here on the right side the questions that it will ask to determine if you're a dependent student or an independent student. So to be considered an independent student, you do have to be 24 years or older, be married or have like dependents of your own, be like a veteran from the U.S. Armed Forces. So things like that. Those are the types of questions that they'll ask to determine if you're dependent or independent, which basically just means if you need to provide parent information or not. Some students do also run into the issue of like, well, my parents don't live together or my parents are separated. So which parents' information do I provide on the FAFSA? And on the next slide, we can kind of break down, if you are in this situation, break down which parent you'll want to put on your FAFSA. So you can follow along on the little chart here. So are your parents married to each other? If yes, you'll provide information for both parents on your FAFSA. If your parents are not married to each other, do they live together? If yes, you'll report information for both parents, even if they were never married, are divorced, or are separated. If your parents do not live together and are not married, then you'll have to determine if there was one parent that you lived more with over the last 12 months. If yes, then you'll report the information on the parent who you lived with more. And then if that parent has now remarried, then you'll also have to report the information for your step parent. If they're not remarried, then you only have to report the information for your parent. So let's say that you split half and half the time between both parents. You'll provide the information on the FAFSA for the parent who provided more financial support over the last 12 months. And then you'll also see on the bottom there, the following people are not your parents unless they have legally adopted you. So like a widowed step-parent, grandparents, foster parents, legal guardians, older brothers or sisters, aunt or uncles. Those are not parents, even if you live with them, unless they have legally adopted you. Yeah. All right, so in the next section, this is really, I would say, the section that most people are most intimidated by or run into issues because it's kind of hard to read tax documents sometimes. So this is providing financial information. So it'll ask for the student's financial information in one section and then the parent's financial information in one section. So make sure that you're reading the question exactly, like answering the questions for the student as the student and answering the questions for the parent as the parent. Don't mix them up. I have seen students who sometimes fill in the parent's information in the student section, vice versa. So just read the questions very carefully. That's really like the number one tip. It's pretty straightforward, and they are now simplifying the FAFSA application. So hopefully it's not as difficult as it has been for some students in the past years. One of the tools that makes it super easy to transfer all of your tax information is the IRS data retrieval tool. This automatically transfers all of the data from the IRS website directly into your FAFSA application. So once you get to that section, all you need to do is click link to the IRS button, and then this will take you to the IRS website. You'll provide your name and the address on the IRS website exactly as it's listed on your tax return. So have your tax return with you to make sure that the address matches. If it's a mismatch, then it won't link. But if it's exactly as it is on your tax return, you shouldn't have any issues with linking the information. You'll select transfer my tax information and then click transfer now. This takes you back to the FAFSA application, and you'll see that all of the data has already been automatically like input. So it makes the application process, like it cuts the time in half, honestly, if you're able to use the IRS data retrieval tool. Using the data retrieval tool also reduces human errors. Sometimes we may mistype a number, things like that. So this is a good tool to use to reduce any errors. And again, I'm telling you, it cuts the process in half. So definitely try to use that if you're eligible. All right, and lastly, you'll need to sign and submit your FAFSA. Again, you can sign your FAFSA electronically with your FSA ID. The student will sign the FAFSA with their FSA ID, and then the parent will sign the FAFSA with their FSA ID. So that's why they have to be two separate FSA IDs for students and parents. If for some reason a parent wasn't able to create an FSA ID, there's also an option for parents to print, sign the form, with pen, and then mail the signature page. On the signature page, there's an address where you'll mail the form. I believe it's like in Kentucky somewhere. So it doesn't go to the schools that you're sending the FAFSA to. There's an address on the signature page where you will mail it to. Your application cannot be reviewed until it is signed by both the student and the parent. All right. And then once you have your FAFSA filed, everything is done, review to make sure that all of your information is correct, your name, your address, your social security number, your parents' names, your parents' address, your parents' social security numbers. Run through, all of the questions to make sure that everything is correct. And then once it's submitted, just make sure that it's actually been processed. Every student will also get an email notification that it's been processed, that it's been received. So you can just make sure that everything was completed and processed and everything. If selected, provide required verification documents. I'll go into more detail on what verification means in the next slide. If you need to make any corrections to your FAFSA, then you're able to log back into the application, and there's like a make a correction option on there. Again, schools will notify you when your financial aid package is ready. So if you're waiting on something, if it's been, a few months already and you haven't heard back, then you would contact the school. The FSA website, the FSA helpline, they can't help you with your financial aid package. That will be the schools directly. So depending on when you apply, depending on when you're admitted, depending on when you submitted your FAFSA application, that'll be kind of, it'll dictate the timeline of when you'll be awarded and everything. All right, so just going into a little bit more detail about verification. So verification is a process that schools, like the financial aid office, will use to verify that the data you provided on your FAFSA is accurate. It doesn't necessarily mean that you did anything wrong. It's just, again, just to verify that everything is correct. If you're selected, the school specifically will notify you requesting additional supporting documentation from either you, the student, or your parent. This can range anywhere from like a verification worksheet to a tax transcript, W-2, just depending on you know, what the situation is. Like if you weren't able to use the data retrieval tool, then you're more likely to be required to submit like tax transcripts, things like that. So again, the data retrieval tool helps a lot, even like with avoiding having to submit verification documents. If you are notified, the only way that you'll know if you're selected for verification is if the school notifies you. So if the school doesn't notify you that you have to submit any additional documentation, you're good to go. You'll get your award letter. You will still get your award letter even if you are selected for verification, but it's not actually finalized until we receive these verification documents. So submit these, you know, as soon as you can once you're notified to avoid delays in receiving and actually receiving the federal funds. We can't disperse any financial aid until the verification process is complete. All right. And I do just want to give more information on estimated family contribution. This EFC is what we call it. So an EFC number is what we use to determine the funds that you're eligible for. So the data that you provide on your FAFSA, like income, household size, number of students in college, the ages of your parents, all of that data is used to calculate your EFC, or your estimated family contribution. This is better understood, just so that everyone understands it better. It's an index number. It's not necessarily a dollar amount that you'll receive in financial aid or an amount that you'll need to pay. It's more of an index number to determine the funds that you're eligible for. So it determines if you're eligible for a Pell Grant, it determines if you're eligible for a MAP grant, it determines if you're eligible for work study, loans, things like that. And this number can range between 0 to 999,999. So the lower your EFC, the more federal funds you would be eligible for. And this number can vary year to year depending on your financial situation. So a FAFSA application does have to be renewed every year. It's not a one and done thing. You do have to renew your FAFSA every year. It opens on October 1st every year. So you will have to renew to determine your new estimated family contribution, to determine if you're still eligible for those federal funds. Right, and we do just have a quick recap of everything. I know it's a lot of information, so just to give you a brief overview of everything we went over.
If you're interested in financial aid for college or career school, you're going to need to fill out the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA. It takes most people about 30 minutes to complete online, and the best part, it's 100% free, and it provides you with access to grants, loans, and work-study funds from the federal government. And many colleges and states use FAFSA information to provide their own college or state financial aid. Before you fill out the FAFSA, it's a good idea to create your FSA ID, a username and password that lets you electronically sign your FAFSA and gives you access to various websites related to federal student aid. And here's an important tip. If your parent is providing information on your FAFSA, he or she will need his or her own FSA ID. Visit studentaid.gov/FSA ID for more information. Your FAFSA can be completed online at FAFSA.gov, and help is provided throughout the online application process. You will need to fill out the FAFSA each year you are in school because your financial situation may change. Plus, you may be able to automatically transfer your tax data from the IRS, making the application even quicker to fill out. Each state and college or career school sets its own deadline for the FAFSA, so it's best to get it done early. Since some of the funds are available on a first-come, first-served basis, you don't want to miss out. Now that you know about the FAFSA, you might be asking, well, how much money will I get? Your college or career school will do the math, and there's a simple formula that they use. First, the college takes your cost of attendance, which is the total amount it will cost you to go to that school. Your cost of attendance will vary from school to school. Then, the college subtracts your expected family contribution, or EFC. Your EFC is based on information provided in your FAFSA and will not change based on the school you attend. However, the EFC is not necessarily the amount of money you will have to pay. Basically, your cost of attendance minus your EFC equals your financial need. Your college uses your financial need and other information to determine how much financial aid you can receive. See? Pretty simple. If you have questions or need more information, please visit studentaid.gov.
All right, so now is the time for questions. If anybody has any questions or concerns, I think I did see one come up. Okay, so if parents are married, will they both need an FSA ID?